Tycoon left wife for being childless. A year later, he saw her with triplets at an event. The first time Jaiwoo met Miho, it wasn't love at first sight. It was tension, electric, sharp, and unexpected. She was a soft-spoken literature teacher at a university in Seoul, a woman of gentle words and quiet dreams. He was the heir of the massive Hwang Corporation, used to deals that involved millions and people who bowed before him. They collided on a rainy afternoon when Miho's car almost splashed water all over her on a narrow university street. "I'm sorry," he said without much emotion, stepping out of the black sedan with his umbrella. His suit was too perfect, his presence too cold. Jaiwoo, soaked and breathless, looked up at him, blinking the rain from her eyes. "You could have stopped a few seconds earlier." And for the first time in a long while, Miho found himself speechless. Her voice wasn't accusing, just disappointed. It stung more than he expected. What followed after that was months of chance encounters that slowly turned into deliberate visits. Miho would appear at the university's bookstore, pretending to browse. Jaiwoo would pretend not to notice, but her heart beat a little faster each time. He brought her coffee once, fumbling awkwardly with the paper cup. "You don't like cream, right?" "I remembered that." Jaiwoo raised an eyebrow. "Since when were you observing my coffee habits?" He smiled faintly. "Since I realized I don't want you to disappear from my days." It wasn't the grand declarations or lavish gifts that won Jaiwoo over. It was the way Miho listened when she talked about poetry, how he looked completely out of place in her world, but chose to stay anyway. He learned to cook ramen her way, walked her to the bus stop, and even sat in on her night classes, pretending to care about British literature. Their love grew in the quiet spaces, in whispers after long days, in stolen moments between their two different worlds. He told her once, during a quiet night walk, "I feel like I can breathe around you, Jaiwoo. No expectations, just peace." But that peace would soon be threatened. When Miho announced to his family that he was going to marry Jaiwoo, chaos erupted. His mother, Lady Hwang, was livid. "She's a commoner. She has no pedigree, no legacy. Do you think the board will respect you with her by your side?" Miho stood firm. "I'm not marrying a legacy. I'm marrying someone who makes me feel human." Jaiwoo heard everything. She had arrived early to Miho's estate to surprise him, but instead she stood behind the door, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers. Hearing her name dragged through ice and fire, she wanted to run. But when Miho found her there, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, he simply held her face and whispered, "You don't need to prove yourself to anyone, not even to my mother." The wedding was modest, considering Miho's background. Jaiwoo insisted on something simple, a ceremony in a garden she used to visit as a child, surrounded by their few close friends and some colleagues. The press whispered, the society pages speculated. But Jaiwoo didn't care. She had Miho and he had her. For a while, life was good. They moved into a modern home on the outskirts of Seoul, just far enough to be away from the noise of the city, close enough for Miho's schedule. Jaiwoo decorated the place with soft lights, bookshelves, and plants. Miho, though awkward at first, eventually started planting herbs on their small balcony. They made routines, Sunday breakfasts, late-night reading sessions, spontaneous getaways to the countryside. And yet, even as their love grew, a shadow began to loom. It started with gentle questions. A friend asking, "No baby yet?" A colleague of Miho's laughing, "You've been married for over a year? Still just the two of you?" Miho would shrug it off with a smile. Jaiwoo would laugh politely, but behind closed doors the tension tightened. She started tracking her cycle, counting days, visiting clinics alone. She didn't tell Miho, not at first. She didn't want him to worry, didn't want to be the source of sadness in his eyes. One night, lying beside him, she whispered, What if I can't?" He turned to her slowly, brushing hair from her forehead. "Then we'll find a way. Together." She smiled, but something inside her already knew that love wasn't always enough to shield them from the world. The real shift came during a dinner at the Hwang family estate. It was one of those forced gatherings where everything looked beautiful but felt like frost. Jaiwoo, in a cream dress, sat beside Miho, her hand lightly on his knee. His mother, perfectly poised across the table, asked casually, "Are you two even trying?" The question wasn't about effort. It was an accusation. Jaiwoo's smile froze. Miho didn't answer. The silence felt deafening. That night, in the car, Jaiwoo spoke first. "I think your mother hates me more now than ever." Miho sighed, staring out the window. "She's just old-fashioned. She wants a grandchild. So do I." The words slipped out so easily, but they hit Jaiwoo like a stone. She turned away, her breath catching. He didn't notice. That was when things began to unravel. Miho became more distant. His long hours at work stretched even longer. Jaiwoo waited, cooked, left little notes in his briefcase. He started missing meals. The flowers she put in his study began to wilt without being noticed. He wasn't cruel. He was absent, like a ghost drifting further each day. And Jaiwoo, sweet, tender Jaiwoo, kept holding on, even as her fingers bled from the effort, until one day she found a folder in his study. Medical reports, her own, and a single note from a specialist. Low probability of natural conception. She had never seen that report before. Miho had requested it without her knowledge. When he came home that night, she stood in the living room, folder in hand. "You had me investigated? I needed answers," he replied coldly, removing his jacket. "You weren't giving me any. And if the answer had been that you were the one who couldn't have children," she asked, her voice shaking, "would I have left you?" He didn't answer. Silence filled the room again. But this time it wasn't cold. It was devastating. Her voice dropped into a trembling whisper. "I thought we were in this together." Still nothing. Just the soft click of Miho setting his briefcase down and loosening his tie. Jaiwoo turned away, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I see," she said softly. "You've already decided." That night, she lay awake while he slept in the other room. Alone in their shared bed, she stared at the ceiling until morning light bled through the curtains. And in that silence, her heart began to accept what her mind had refused to believe. The man who once told her she made him feel human, now made her feel invisible. The following weeks felt like a slow descent into something unrecognizable. Miho stopped coming home altogether some nights, claiming urgent work matters. When he was there, he barely spoke, just stared at his phone or read through files with his back to her. Jaiwoo cooked his favorite meals and watched them go cold. She left him notes and found them untouched. One night, she placed a tiny knitted pair of baby socks on his desk. Not as an announcement, but as a symbol of hope. He didn't even ask what they were. Then came the night of the anniversary. Jaiwoo had spent the day preparing, lighting candles around the house, setting the table, dressing in the first dress she wore on their honeymoon. A soft melody played in the background. She had written a letter, pouring her heart into every word, folding it neatly beside his plate. But hours passed. The food dried. The candles melted into silence. Midnight arrived, and Miho never came. She sat alone at the table, watching the flame of the last candle flicker and die. When she finally reached him by phone, his voice was cold. "I'm still at the office. Don't wait up. You forgot, didn't you?" A pause. "We can celebrate another time." Jaiwoo nodded, tears welling in her eyes even as she whispered, "There won't be another time." That was the first night she truly understood that something in him had already changed. Not shifted, changed. She was no longer his comfort, his peace. She was a shadow he didn't want to face. A week later, he returned home early. She heard his keys in the door, his shoes on the floor. For a second, hope bloomed. But the expression on his face when he entered was not that of someone coming home. It was someone preparing for war. He stood by the door, his arms folded. Jaiwoo looked up from the couch, a book resting in her lap. "Miho, I want to talk," he said. His tone was clipped, formal. She nodded slowly. "Okay." He sat across from her, on the armrest of a chair, keeping a physical and emotional distance. His eyes didn't meet hers. "I've filed for divorce. It didn't register at first. The words floated in the air, surreal and foreign. Her voice cracked. You what? He finally looked at her. But there was no softness left in his gaze. This isn't working. We've tried. It's not your fault. Don't say that, she interrupted, standing up. Don't say, it's not your fault, when you haven't even tried to fix anything. Miho's jaw clenched. I can't build a future without a family, Jaiwoo. I've been patient. You gave up the moment your mother started whispering in your ear. You think this is about my mother? His voice rose for the first time. This is about us. About what we can't have. Jaiwoo's hands were shaking now. No, this is about what you can't accept. About how quickly you forgot the promises you made to me. How you let me wither here while you walked away without even turning around. Miho stood, his expression blank. The papers will arrive tomorrow. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of? She repeated bitterly. Like a problem to be compensated? He didn't respond. He walked to the bedroom, packed a small bag, and left within 15 minutes. Jaiwoo didn't cry at first. She just stood there, staring at the door that had slammed shut on everything she believed was unbreakable. The silence in the house was so loud it made her ears ring. The next morning, the papers came. She signed them, not because she agreed, but because she knew begging someone to stay never builds love. A week later, she vanished. She left her job at the university, gave up the apartment, and disappeared from the city entirely. Her close friend, Hanul, helped arrange it all. A small cottage in a quiet coastal town, far from Seoul, far from the pain. You can start again, Hanul told her, holding her tightly at the train station. You don't have to explain anything to anyone. Jaiwoo nodded, eyes still swollen from sleepless nights. I just need to breathe. I don't know who I am without him. But I need to find out. It was in that little seaside town, where the waves whispered secrets and the stars watched in silence, that Jaiwoo began to find fragments of herself again. She taught literature part-time at a local school. She planted flowers in the yard. She watched the ocean every morning, trying to remember how to hope. And then, one afternoon, the world shifted again. It was quiet. The wind carried the scent of salt and early blossoms. Jaiwoo was folding laundry when she felt an ache deep in her stomach. She paused, placing a hand over her belly, feeling something unfamiliar, like a flutter, then a stillness. She'd been feeling odd for weeks. Dizziness, nausea, exhaustion. But she had chalked it all up to grief, to heartbreak. Still, that evening, as she sat in front of her tiny mirror, a thought bloomed. She bought a test the next day, and when the result appeared, her hands trembled. Her breath caught. Pregnant. The test slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor. She stared into the mirror, tears pooling in her eyes. I'm pregnant, she whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it real. But it was real. She wasn't broken. She wasn't barren. She wasn't the reason her marriage had ended. And what she didn't know, not yet, was that this pregnancy would not bring her one child. 3 heartbeats, he repeated gently. You're expecting triplets. Jaiwoo blinked, her lips parted. Triplets, the doctor nodded. They're healthy, very active for this stage. I'd like to monitor you closely because multiple pregnancies come with their own risks. But for now, everything looks strong. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. She pressed a hand to her belly, breath shaky. 3 lives, 3 heartbeats. After all the pain, all the hopeless nights, her body, the one that had been judged, dismissed, pitted, was now home to not 1, but 3 tiny miracles. As she walked home from the clinic, the soft wind brushing her cheeks, she whispered to the sky, You chose to come to me, even when your father didn't. The cottage by the sea, once filled with quiet sorrow, slowly began to change. Jaiwoo rearranged the furniture to make room for a crib, then 2, then 3. Her students at the small school brought her hand-me-downs, toys, blankets. The local women began stopping by with warm meals and advice, laughing and hugging her belly. You're going to be a strong mother, one said, wiping flour off her hands. Even stronger than you already are. Jaiwoo smiled, tired but grateful. But at night, when the sea howled outside her windows and the loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy shawl, she would whisper to the babies growing inside her, "I'm scared, but I'll love you with everything I have." She never told anyone who the father was. Not even Hanul. It didn't matter. To her, Miho belonged to a past that had turned its back when she needed it most. Time passed quickly. At 7 months, her belly felt like it carried the sun. Heavy, warm, and constantly moving. She would sit on the porch and hum lullabies to them, her hands cradling the life inside her. They kicked when she laughed. They quieted when she cried. And one early morning, long before the sun had risen, Jaiwoo felt the sharp pain that told her everything was about to change. She was rushed to the small clinic in town, barely able to breathe between contractions. The world became a blur of white lights, nurses' voices, the tight grip of fear. "It's early," someone said, "but we're ready." She was alone. No husband pacing the hallway, no hand to hold. But as the pain surged and the cries of her babies filled the room, one after another, soft, desperate, alive, Jaiwoo felt something deeper than anything she had ever known. She had brought them into the world alone. And yet, she had never felt less alone in her life. She named them Minjae, Sua, and Haru. Each had a piece of her heart. Minjae had Miho's eyes. Sua had Jaiwoo's quiet smile. Haru came last, the smallest, but cried the loudest. A fierce reminder that even the tiniest voice can carry the greatest strength. The days that followed were a haze of bottle feedings, lullabies, diapers, and exhaustion so deep it curled into her bones. But in between all the chaos, there were moments of pure magic. Minjae clutching her finger in his sleep, Sua giggling at the sound of Jaiwoo's voice, Haru falling asleep against her chest. Jaiwoo barely recognized herself in the mirror anymore. Her face had changed, softer in some ways, more worn in others. She had circles under her eyes and stretch marks across her belly. But her gaze was steady, her strength undeniable. One night, as she rocked the three of them to sleep, she whispered, "You're my beginning again." Meanwhile, in Seoul, Miho's life had not become what he expected. He had returned to the same routines, the same high-rise buildings, the same empty apartment that once held traces of Jaiwoo's laughter. So he, the woman his mother had once enthusiastically pushed into his life, now filled his evenings with elegant dinners and conversation that lacked soul. Miho couldn't explain it, even to himself, the dull ache he carried, the sense that something wasn't complete. He thought it would pass, that with time, Jaiwoo would become a distant memory, like a poem you once loved but forgot the ending to. But she didn't fade, not even a little. He kept seeing her in odd places, not in person but in shadows. A bookstore window, the smell of her favorite tea, a child laughing the way she used to laugh in the rain. Miho began working longer hours, staying late at the office not because he had to, but because going home meant facing the silence he had chosen. And then one morning, during a quarterly board meeting, he saw a name he hadn't heard in a year. Professor Jaiwoo Lee. Her name flashed on a sponsorship proposal from an education initiative in the southern provinces, a foundation supporting early childhood programs in underfunded areas. She was being honored for her work as a volunteer educator. He stared at the screen for a long time. Something inside him shifted. Later that week, he confronted his mother. She wasn't infertile, he said, placing a copy of a medical analysis from her volunteer program on the table. It had been public, part of a study Jaiwoo had participated in, with names of all mothers and children anonymized except hers, listed as a leading figure. His mother, always composed, looked up sharply. "That doesn't change anything. You already—" "I didn't listen to her. I destroyed the only real thing I had. You chose to move on." Miho's hands trembled slightly. "No, I chose cowardice." That night, he sat alone in his apartment, staring out at the city lights. His reflection in the window looked tired, older. He whispered to the dark, "Jaiwoo, where did you go?" He didn't know it yet, but fate was already setting the stage for their reunion. One where he would know. longer be able to look away, one where she would no longer be standing alone, and one where 3 small hearts would echo the truth louder than any words ever could. She found the envelope on the floor while reaching for the kettle. No return address, just her name written in soft, careful handwriting. Inside, a cream-colored card. You are cordially invited to the Seoul Children's Foundation Gala, honoring educators who have brought light to our future. Your work has changed lives. Now, let us celebrate yours. Her breath caught. The gala, in Seoul. She hadn't stepped foot in that city since the day she left. The name alone stirred something heavy in her chest. Memories rose like dust in sunlight, boardroom conversations, whispered promises in their shared kitchen, the cold slam of a door she never reopened. But as she turned the card over, something else caught her eye, her own name. Bold, elegant, engraved in gold. Lifetime achievement in rural education, Jae-woo Lee. She stood in the silence of her kitchen, the card trembling in her hand. Not because she was proud, but because it reminded her of who she used to be and how far she had come. Still, the thought of returning to that city, that world, to him, filled her with a kind of dread she couldn't explain. "I can't," she whispered, setting the card down. But later that night, as she rocked Haru back to sleep and watched Min-jae dream with his lips softly parted, she asked herself the question she had buried for over a year. Why am I still afraid of him? The answer came in the quiet. Because part of her still wanted to be seen by him. The week leading up to the gala was a whirlwind. Jae-woo borrowed a dress from one of the mothers at the school. Something simple but elegant. Hanul traveled from Seoul to babysit the triplets, demanding photos every 5 minutes. "I can't believe you're going," she said, applying blush to Jae-woo's cheeks with a smile. "You're going to walk into that room like a storm." Jae-woo laughed nervously. "I don't know what I'm walking into." "You're not walking into your past," Hanul said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You're walking in as someone who survived it." The gala was held at one of Seoul's grandest hotels. Chandeliers hanging like crystal rain, tables dressed in silk, a string quartet playing soft music that wrapped around the room like a lullaby. Jae-woo stepped in, clutching her small purse, heart pounding beneath the satin of her gown. She hadn't seen Miho yet, but she could feel it. A strange pulling in the air, like gravity itself knew they were in the same city again. Miho arrived late. He hadn't planned to come at all. When he first saw Jae-woo's name on the guest list weeks ago, he stared at it for so long the text blurred. He had almost ripped the page, almost called to ask if it was a mistake. But something in him knew she was alive, well, still herself, maybe stronger. And he needed to see that with his own eyes. He stepped into the ballroom wearing the same navy suit he wore the night he proposed. A subconscious choice, maybe, or maybe something in him hoped she would remember. The moment their eyes met, it was like time cracked open. Jae-woo was standing near the stage, speaking softly with another guest. Miho froze mid-step. The noise of the room faded until there was nothing but the sound of his own breath. She turned, and for a second, one single suspended second, her smile faltered. His chest tightened. She was radiant, not because of the dress or the makeup or the lighting, but because there was life in her now. A quiet fire, something he had tried to snuff out, and failed. He walked toward her slowly. Jae-woo didn't move, not until he was close enough to speak. Not loud, not dramatic, just a whisper meant only for her. "I didn't know you'd be here." She tilted her head slightly. "I was invited." He nodded, eyes scanning her face. "You look different." "So do you," she replied quietly. "Older, tired." A beat passed between them. Then she turned away just enough to let him know the conversation was over, or at least it was on her terms now. But Miho wasn't done. During the ceremony, Jae-woo was called to the stage. As the announcer listed her accomplishments, the audience applauded politely. Miho's eyes didn't leave her once. He watched as she stood tall, her hands steady, her voice unwavering as she accepted the award. But his heart stopped when she said, "I left Seoul because I thought I was broken. I came back because I realized I'm whole. Not because someone made me that way, but because I survived being forgotten." And I found joy again, not in perfection, but in small, honest love. He knew then, she wasn't just living without him. She was thriving. After the applause faded and guests drifted toward the banquet tables, Miho approached her again, this time slower, more careful. I didn't know, he said. Jaiwoo didn't look at him. I didn't know you were hurting so much. Her voice came softer this time. Because you didn't ask. He took a breath, his throat dry. Were you ever going to tell me? Now she looked up. Not with anger, but with something far more piercing. I begged you to stay, she said. I begged you with every meal I made, with every night I waited, with every word I didn't say because I didn't want to break you. I was telling you every day. You just didn't want to hear it. Miho's eyes burned. Jaiwoo, you don't get to say my name like that anymore. Silence fell between them, and in it, everything they had once been, every memory, every touch, every silence, unfolded like a book left in the rain, smudged, unreadable. But Jaiwoo's voice broke the moment again. I'm happy now, she said, holding his gaze. Not because I moved on, but because I remembered how to love without needing to be loved back. And with that, she turned and walked away. Miho stood in the crowd, watching her disappear. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that outside the grand hall, parked under the soft glow of the streetlights, sat a car. Inside were 3 tiny children, fast asleep, all of them with his eyes. She paused beside the car. Hanul rolled down the window and gave her a gentle smile. Inside, the 3 car seats were arranged in the back. Haru had 1 foot dangling out of his blanket. Min-jae was clutching his plush bunny, and Sua's thumb was still resting near her lips. Jaiwoo opened the door quietly, careful not to wake them. She leaned in and kissed each forehead, breathing them in like oxygen. Her world, her reason for never looking back. They slept through everything, Hanul whispered from the driver's seat. Good, Jaiwoo replied softly, her voice fragile. I don't want them to feel any of this. Hanul looked at her. You okay? Jaiwoo hesitated. Then she nodded. I didn't cry. That's not the same as being okay. I know. She gently brushed Sua's hair away from her face. But it's something. Behind them, the gala's soft music echoed from the tall hotel windows. Jaiwoo looked back once, just once, and saw the golden light pouring onto the steps. Inside that light was the man who once promised her forever, and then walked away from it. But before she could turn to get in the car, she heard her name. Jaiwoo, she froze. She hadn't heard him say her name like that in over a year. Not with anger, not with coldness, but with need, with something trembling inside it. Miho stood at the top of the stairs, no longer the picture-perfect tycoon in control of everything. He looked undone, desperate, and lost. Jaiwoo didn't move. Please don't go, he said, beginning to descend the stairs. Hanul, still seated, gripped the steering wheel. Her eyes narrowed. Do you want me to drive? Jaiwoo raised her hand slightly, not as an answer, but as a gesture for pause. Miho came closer now, stopping just a few feet from the car. His eyes flicked to the back window, then widened. He saw them, the tiny silhouettes, the small heads resting against pillows, the unmistakable curve of his own nose on a little boy's sleeping face. His breath left him all at once. Are they? Jaiwoo stepped between him and the window, her body protective, her expression unreadable. You lost the right to ask that question, she said calmly, but he looked at her, eyes shining. I didn't know. Jaiwoo, if I had known. You would have done what? She asked, her voice rising only slightly. Stayed? Pretended to be a father to keep your reputation clean? Or maybe claimed them like trophies for the family legacy you chose over me? Miho flinched. No, that's not. You gave up on me the moment things got difficult. Her eyes glistened now. I was pregnant when you left. I didn't know until after the papers were signed. And you know what's cruel, Miho? I spent months wondering if I should tell you, if you deserved to know. And every time I asked myself that question, I remembered the look on your face the night you walked away. Like I was nothing. like love meant nothing. He was shaking his head, slowly, as if trying to reverse time by force. You should have told me. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You should have stayed. Silence stretched between them, thick and aching. I've changed, he said finally. You may not believe me, but that night, the night I saw you on stage, something inside me broke. I realized what I'd thrown away. It's too late for realizations, she replied, eyes glassy now. You weren't there for the sleepless nights, for the fear, for the hospital visits, for the day Haru almost stopped breathing and I sat on the floor sobbing because I thought I'd lose him and I had no one to call. I buried my pride, my fear, my exhaustion for them. Alone. Miho swallowed hard. Let me meet them, please. They don't know you exist, she said bluntly. And if I let you in, it's not a door I can close again. So think very carefully before you ask again. He nodded slowly. I want to meet them, not because I deserve to, but because they deserve to know who they are, and who their mother is, the strongest woman I've ever known. Jaiwoo's breath hitched. Hanul stepped out of the car, sensing the moment shift. She opened the back door and gently unbuckled Min-jae, who stirred in her arms. Jaiwoo reached out and held him. Then she turned, cradling the boy against her shoulder, and met Miho's eyes. Minji's head lifted slightly, and his small voice, half dreaming, half awake, mumbled, Mommy? Who's that man? Jaiwoo's chest tightened. Her lips trembled. She looked at Miho, the man who once left her, now standing in front of the very life he once said would never exist. She kneeled, lowering Min-jae to the ground gently, and brushed his hair back. That man, she said softly, tears now falling freely, is someone who hurt Mommy a long time ago, but he's also someone who might want to love you, if you let him. Min-jae blinked, confused, then looked at the stranger in front of him. Miho dropped to his knees. He didn't speak, didn't reach out. He just stared at the boy, at the shape of his face, the softness in his eyes, the familiar tilt of his head. I'm sorry, Miho whispered, voice cracking, for everything. Min-jae studied him in silence, then took one small step forward. Jaiwoo watched, heart pounding, afraid, hopeful, wounded. Min-jae reached out and placed his tiny hand on Miho's cheek. Are you sad? The boy asked. Miho nodded, tears spilling. Then don't cry, Min-jae said, tilting his head. Mommy says crying alone is the worst kind of sad. And without another word, he wrapped his arms around Miho's neck. Jaiwoo turned away, her hand covering her mouth as a sob broke loose. Hanul reached for her, and they stood there. Two women who had seen her through the darkest year of her life, watching the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. From the car, Sua stirred. Haru yawned. He closed his eyes and whispered into the silence between them, You're real. Jaiwoo stood still, arms crossed over her chest, watching with a trembling breath. She didn't know whether to step in or let the moment stretch. There was a storm of feelings inside her. Relief, fear, anger, sorrow, all twisted together like vines growing in every direction. Behind her, Sua let out a soft whimper from the car. Haru stirred, rubbing his eyes. Jaiwoo turned, instinct taking over. Hanul, can you? I got them, Hanul said gently, already climbing into the back seat to unbuckle the twins. Miho stood up slowly, carrying Min-jae in his arms as if he were made of porcelain. Their eyes met again. He's so light, Miho murmured almost to himself, but he feels like the heaviest thing I've ever carried. Jaiwoo swallowed hard. Because now you finally understand what it means. Sua came out next, sleepy-eyed and quiet, clutching the hem of Hanul's coat. Haru followed clumsily behind, dragging his blanket like a cape. They looked around, confused by the city lights, the unfamiliar surroundings, the strange man holding their brother. Sua stared at Miho, then at Jaiwoo, then back at him. Mommy? She asked, tugging Jaiwoo's sleeve. Is he our friend? Jaiwoo knelt beside her, brushing her hair away. He's someone very important, and he's just meeting you for the first time. Miho crouched to their level. Hi, he said softly, voice unsteady. I'm Miho. Sua tilted her head. That's a funny name. Haru, still drowsy, squinted at him. Do you have snacks? Miho let out a breathless laugh. The sound choked with emotion. I can get some. What do you like? Strawberry milk and marshmallows. Haru mumbled, yawning. Okay, Miho said, nodding. I'll remember that. The children circled him now like curious cats. Not quite sure who he was, but too innocent to feel threatened. Min-jae had one hand on Miho's jacket. Sua was examining his cufflinks. Haru leaned on his knee, thumb in mouth, blanket trailing behind him. It was Jaiwoo who broke the moment. We should go, she said quietly. They've had a long day. Miho stood, regret flashing across his face. Can I come with you? Just to walk, to talk. Jaiwoo hesitated, then nodded once. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the children tucked between them, asking questions about buildings and buses and street lamps. Jaiwoo kept glancing at Miho. His face was unreadable, not cold, not warm, just overwhelmed. Finally, when the kids had quieted again, Jaiwoo spoke. I never expected this moment. He turned his head. Neither did I. She stopped walking and turned to face him. You should know something. Miho looked at her. She took a breath. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat on the floor and listened to the rain. It was raining that day. I remember because the silence between us was always loudest when it rained. He didn't interrupt. I thought about calling you, she continued, 1,000 times. But every time I looked at my phone, I remembered the look in your eyes when you left. I didn't want my children to feel that. Ever. Miho's voice was barely audible. You were right to protect them from me. Jaiwoo looked away. I was scared, he added. Not of them. Of me. Of being a failure. Of not knowing how to love something I didn't understand. She turned back to him, voice firm now. They don't need perfect. They need present. They need someone who shows up. Who doesn't run. I want to be that, he said. Now. Jaiwoo gave him a long look. They don't know you. This won't be easy. I know. They might hate you one day. I deserve it. They might ask why you weren't there when they were born, when they were sick, when they cried. I'll answer every question. They'll need consistency, not visits, not gifts, real presence. I'll give it. Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't look away. And if you ever walk away again, I won't. Silence settled between them, heavy, but not empty. I don't love you anymore, Jaiwoo said suddenly. The words came like an unexpected storm. Miho flinched. I needed to say it out loud, she added, her voice softer now, because I used to love you so much it hurt to breathe. But I buried that love so deep just to survive. He nodded, slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. Or your heart. You won't have either. Not yet. But maybe one day? His voice cracked. Jaiwoo looked at their children playing near a bench, Min-jae trying to climb onto it with Haru's help and Sua handing out imaginary cookies. She sighed. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but for tonight, they can know your name. Miho's eyes watered. And you can walk us home. A pause. A long, breathless pause. Then he nodded. Okay. As they continued down the quiet street, the children laughing ahead of them, Jaiwoo walked beside the man she once loved. Not as his wife. Not as the woman he abandoned. But as the mother of his children, the only title that would ever truly matter now. And in the soft glow of the street lamps, with the night wrapping around them like a fragile promise, something began again. Not love, but possibility. The road curved through the hills as the city disappeared behind them, replaced by the hush of the countryside and the distant sound of the ocean. It was nothing like the polished, sterile neighborhoods Miho was used to. There were no gates, no security, no glossy perfection. Just a small cottage, paint peeling on the windowsills, a clothesline swaying in the wind, children's shoes on the porch, stacked in disorderly rows. and yet it was alive. "This is where you've been?" Miho asked quietly, turning off the engine. Jaiwoo unbuckled Sua. "It's not much, but it's enough." He stepped out and looked around, stunned by how much he'd missed. There were toys scattered across the yard. A little tricycle tipped over near the garden. Flower pots filled with wild herbs. Didn't look like survival. It looked like home. Miho bent down to untangle Haru's car seat strap. The boy blinked up at him sleepily, then held out his arms. "Carrie?" He felt something catch in his throat. "Yeah, okay." Jaiwoo paused in the doorway and turned slightly, watching. Min-jae ran ahead, already calling out for his favorite book. Sua followed, singing to herself. Inside, the house smelled like warm milk and lavender. Books lined the shelves. Handmade drawings taped to the walls. A family photo not taken, just drawn in crayon. Jaiwoo in the center. 3 little stick figures around her. And a 4th figure smaller in the corner. Miho's heart twisted. "Is that me?" he asked, pointing to the corner figure. Jaiwoo looked over and nodded. Min-jae drew it a few months ago. Said he dreamt of a man who looked like him but never spoke. He swallowed hard. "He remembers me, without ever knowing me." She didn't answer. That afternoon, Jaiwoo made soup while the children napped. Miho sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, watching her. Not speaking, just watching. There was something different about her. Not just the lines of exhaustion or the way her eyes scanned the house every few seconds, always alert. It was something deeper. She no longer carried herself like someone waiting to be loved. She carried herself like someone who had already done the hardest thing anyone could do. She had saved herself. Miho cleared his throat. "You didn't have help, did you?" Jaiwoo stirred the pot slowly. "I had Hanul, the village, the teachers. They were more family than anyone else. I should have been here." "Yes," she replied softly. "But you weren't." He nodded, shame flushing his face. "I want to learn. I want to know everything I missed. Their bedtime routines. What songs they like. Their favorite stories. Even what kind of cereal they hate." Jaiwoo turned off the stove and faced him. "You don't get to skip to the middle of the story," she said. "You left during the first chapter. You start from the beginning. That means listening, watching, showing up, earning it." Miho's voice trembled. "I will, even if it takes the rest of my life." She studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "They deserve a father, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them." That night, he stayed in a small inn nearby. Jaiwoo sent him updates through brief texts. Min-jae lost his bunny. Sua made you a drawing. Haru asked if you have a bed too. The next morning, he arrived early, too early, with breakfast boxes and sleepy eyes. Jaiwoo opened the door in a sweatshirt, hair tied loosely, surprised. "You didn't sleep, did you?" He shrugged. "Not much. My mind won't stop." She looked past him. "Where's your car?" "I walked from the inn. I didn't want to miss anything." Miho spent the day learning how to button tiny jackets and pour cereal without spilling it everywhere. He watched cartoons with Haru, learned to sing Sua's favorite lullaby, and helped Min-jae build a tower that collapsed 3 times before they finally got it right. It was messy, awkward, beautiful. Later that evening, Jaiwoo stood outside, watching the sky shift to violet. Miho stepped beside her, hands in his coat pockets. "I never asked," he said after a long pause. "Were you scared? When you found out you were pregnant?" She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she whispered, "I was terrified." Miho turned his head, watching her. "I didn't know if I could do it alone. Some nights I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I talked to them even before they were born, telling them not to worry, that I'd figure it out, even when I didn't believe it myself." He looked down. "You were always the brave one," she added. "No," he said, his voice low. "You were." She glanced at him. "Bravery isn't staying when it's easy. It's staying when everything tells you to run. You didn't stay." He nodded slowly, shame heavy in his chest. "But you're here now," she said, almost to herself. "And that's more than I ever expected." Miho's throat tightened. Can I come back tomorrow? Jaiwoo looked at the stars. I'll leave the gate open, she said. That night, as he walked back toward the village, Miho turned once to look at the little house. Its windows glowing, the silhouette of Jaiwoo rocking Sua in the chair visible through the curtain. For the first time in years, he felt a warmth he couldn't name. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. At first, Jaiwoo watched him like a hawk. Not with anger, with caution. She never told the children who he really was. Not yet. She called him Mr. Miho, and when they asked if he was staying, she'd answer with, only if he keeps being kind. Kindness, after all, was something she'd learned to measure in action, not promises. Miho tried, earnestly, clumsily. He spilled juice on Haru's coloring book, misread Minji's nap schedule, and once mistakenly told Sua she could have chocolate before dinner, which led to a sugar-fueled disaster Jaiwoo handled with barely restrained fury. But he stayed, even when it was awkward, even when Jaiwoo barely spoke to him. One rainy afternoon, the kind that turned the sky a deep gray and made the cottage smell of wet soil and warm blankets, Jaiwoo came in from hanging clothes to find Miho on the floor surrounded by puzzles. Minjae was leaning against him, focused. Sua was curled under his arm, watching. Haru was asleep in his lap, drooling slightly. Miho looked up, his eyes wide, as if he'd been caught doing something forbidden. Jaiwoo stood in the doorway, and for a moment she didn't move, because that image, her children wrapped around the man who had once walked away from them, made something ache in her chest, something confusing, not forgiveness, but longing. I was going to clean this up, Miho whispered. Jaiwoo shook her head. Don't. She moved past him into the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the kettle. She didn't know what was happening. Every day he returned, a part of her softened, but another part braced for betrayal. She couldn't stop remembering what it had felt like to cry alone in that very room. What it felt like to read articles about Miho's glamorous outings with another woman while she sat there, bloated, scared, abandoned. She couldn't forget it. Not yet. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Miho lingered by the door. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. She nodded. But before he could turn to leave, her voice stopped him. Miho. He turned back, eyebrows raised. She hesitated. Why her? He froze. Why so he? She asked, arms folded now, voice tight. After everything we were, after everything we had. Why was she so easy to choose? Miho looked at the floor for a long time before answering. Because she made me feel like I didn't have to try. Jaiwoo blinked. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand. She was safe. But not real, he said, his voice low. You were real. So real that being with you made me see every flaw in myself. I felt small next to your strength. I thought walking away was easier than admitting I didn't deserve you. Jaiwoo's eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. I didn't need you to be perfect, she whispered. I just needed you to stay. I know that now, he said, stepping closer. I've spent every day since wanting to go back and choose differently. She shook her head. You can't go back, but I can stand still, here, beside what I left. There was silence, and then Jaiwoo whispered, almost to herself, Do you regret it? Everything. He looked her in the eye. I regret that you had to become this strong without me. I regret that my children were born into this world not knowing their father's voice. I regret not listening, not staying. But I don't regret loving you. That was the moment Jaiwoo finally let one tear fall. Just one. She brushed it away quickly. Go home, Miho. He hesitated, then nodded. But as he reached the porch, she called out again. Tomorrow, come earlier. Haru wants to show you his seashell collection. He turned back, smiling through wet eyes. I'll be here. The next morning, Miho arrived before breakfast with a bag full of small surprises. Strawberry milk, marshmallows, and a notebook for each child. He even brought Jaiwoo her favorite tea, though he said nothing about it, just placed it on the counter quietly. Jaiwoo served him a bowl of soup. Wordlessly, they sat in the kitchen while the children played outside, their laughter drifting through the windows like music. Miho stirred his soup, then said, "I've been looking at apartments nearby." Jaiwoo raised her eyes slowly. "I'm not asking to move in," he said quickly. "I just want to be close. So if one of them gets sick, or has a bad dream, or forgets a school project, I'm 10 minutes away." She didn't speak, but something in her eyes shifted. That afternoon, Jaiwoo watched from the kitchen as Miho carried Haru on his back, Min-jae holding his hand, and Sua chattering about a bird's nest she found. The sky was clear, the light golden. She didn't realize she was smiling. That night, when the children had gone to sleep, Jaiwoo opened her drawer and pulled out an old letter. The one she wrote the day she found out she was pregnant. The one she never sent. She sat by the window and read it aloud to herself. "Dear Miho, you left me, but something stayed. 3 little heartbeats. 3 little lights. I don't know if you'll ever meet them, but I hope they grow to be nothing like you, and yet maybe a little, because once you made me believe in love." She folded it slowly, eyes soft with memories. Then she placed it in a box, along with her wedding ring and the hospital bracelets from the birth. Some stories weren't meant to be erased, only rewritten. Oh ChatGPT Ds. The weeks passed, each one more fragile and more hopeful than the last. Miho became a quiet fixture in their lives, a shadow that no longer loomed, but softened. He walked the children to the little school, held Haru's hand when he cried about scraped knees, and spent every afternoon helping Sua trace letters with her chubby fingers while Min-jae explained complicated dreams he had the night before. He wasn't perfect. He didn't try to be. But Jaiwoo noticed the little things, how he showed up early, even when it rained, how he stayed late even when the kids were already asleep, how he started asking about their future, not with guilt, but with care. Still, she held her heart like glass. She couldn't afford to drop it again. Then came the letter. One afternoon, Jaiwoo found it in her mailbox. Thick, expensive paper. The family crest pressed in gold on the envelope. The Huang crest. Her stomach turned before she even opened it. Inside, a formal invitation. The annual Huang Foundation Benefit Gala. Guest of honor, Chairman Miho Huang. Suggested guests, immediate family. No greeting, no warmth, just command disguised as etiquette. Miho came by that evening, dressed more sharply than usual. Jaiwoo handed him the envelope without a word. He read it slowly, then looked up, face tense. "I didn't know they'd reach out to you directly." Jaiwoo folded her arms. "They want to parade us, show off the reformed son with his miracle children. I don't want them near the kids." "But you're going to the gala?" "I have to. The board expects it. But I can decline them being involved." What do they even know about us?" she asked, voice rising. "Did you tell them everything? Or just the parts that make you look like the man who came back, not the man who walked away?" Miho flinched. "I told them I made a mistake, that I want to fix it." Jaiwoo stepped back, wounded. "You think this can be fixed?" "No," he said quickly. "But I can still choose better. Every day." She stared at him, her breath shaking. Then, quietly, "What did your mother say when you told her?" His jaw tightened. "She said I was being weak, that you used me, that you trapped me with children that should have never been born." Jaiwoo closed her eyes. "I told her," he continued, voice hoarse now, "that if she ever wanted to see me again, she would never say your name with disrespect, that if she couldn't love the children, she didn't deserve to call herself their grandmother." Jaiwoo opened her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something in him she hadn't before. Not guilt, not sorrow, but defense. A man no longer torn between past and present. "I can stay," he said, stepping closer. "I'll skip the gala." "No," she replied softly. "Go." He blinked. "You want me to?" "You should face them," she said. "Not just for you. For them. For us." He searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I'm not sure about anything," Jaiwoo confessed. "But hiding never helped either of us." He reached into his coat and pulled out 3 little envelopes. One for each child. "I wrote them letters. For when they're older. so they know I never forgot a single day since I met them. Jaiwoo took them, pressing them to her chest. Thank you. Miho left with a quiet goodbye, and Jaiwoo stood by the window for a long time after, watching the last of the daylight disappear beyond the hills. The night of the gala arrived like a storm. Jaiwoo stayed home. She made popcorn for the kids, let them build a fort in the living room, and watched cartoons with them until they all fell asleep tangled in blankets. But her eyes kept drifting to the clock. Meanwhile, in the heart of Seoul, Miho stood on a marble stage under a sea of lights and false applause. His mother smiled from the front row, hollow and tight-lipped. The cameras flashed as he accepted the award for legacy contribution. The words felt empty. When the time came for his speech, he stepped forward. The room fell silent. He took a breath. I'm honored to receive this, he began, his voice clear. But this isn't about legacy. Not really. It's about redemption. Whispers rippled through the audience. A year ago, I thought I had everything. Power, wealth, control. I threw away love, believing it was weakness. I abandoned the one person who saw me when I couldn't see myself. And in doing so, I missed the moment my real legacy began. He paused. I have 3 children. Gasps echoed across the room. His mother's face turned pale. They were born into this world without a father, he continued, because I was too afraid to be one, too proud to admit I was wrong. But they, and their mother, are the strongest people I've ever known. Now his voice cracked. They didn't need me, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning the chance to be part of their story. Silence. Then one slow clap. Then another. Miho stepped down from the stage, heart pounding, and walked out of the hall without a word. Past the cameras, past the press, past his mother's outstretched hand. He didn't stop until he was in his car, the city blurring outside the window. And then, for the first time since the night Jaiwoo had left, he let himself cry. That night, Jaiwoo woke to a knock on the door. It was nearly midnight. She opened it slowly, heart racing. Miho stood there, still in his tuxedo, soaked from the rain. His tie undone, his hair wet. He looked up at her, eyes shining. I said what I needed to say, he whispered. Jaiwoo searched his face. And now, he added breathless, I need to know if I still have a place in your world. She didn't speak, just stepped aside. He walked in, dripping and broken and whole. And somewhere in the house, a small voice stirred, calling out, Daddy! Miho froze. Jaiwoo turned, eyes wide. Min-jae stood at the top of the stairs, holding his bunny. And for the first time, Miho didn't have to ask for permission. He ran to his son, lifted him into his arms, and held him like everything he'd ever needed. Min-jae pulled back slightly, his little fingers touching Miho's cheek. You came back, he said simply. Miho swallowed. I did. Are you staying now? Jaiwoo took a small step forward, but Miho's voice came first, soft and careful. If Mommy says I can. Min-jae looked over his shoulder. Mommy? Jaiwoo opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. She looked at her son's eyes, so full of hope, so full of that same gentleness Miho once had when he held her hand under their favorite willow tree in the city. Her voice broke as she whispered, Yes, he's staying, for now. Min-jae nodded and leaned into Miho's chest again, his breath already slowing. Min-jae, Jaiwoo said gently, let's get you back to bed, sweetheart. Miho carried him upstairs in silence. Jaiwoo followed behind, each step trembling beneath her. They reached the small shared room. Stars stuck to the ceiling, picture books in a crooked pile, and 3 tiny beds that held her world. Sua stirred, blinking up at them. Mommy? She mumbled. Why are you crying? Jaiwoo didn't realize the tears had fallen. I'm not, baby, she whispered. Just tired. Sua yawned. Is the man still here? Min-jae was already slipping under his blanket. He's daddy, he mumbled proudly, eyes already closing. Sua sat up, confused. But I thought daddies lived in stories. Miho stepped forward, kneeling beside her bed. I used to, he said gently. But I'm real. And I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. She studied him for a moment, then touched his wet sleeve. You're cold. I was afraid if I waited, I'd miss my chance. Sua gave a sleepy nod, as if that made perfect sense. She reached for her stuffed bear and laid back down, her tiny voice murmuring, "Don't leave the story again." Haru, from the far corner, sat up with his blanket still wrapped around him like a cape. "You're the man from the picture," he said, his voice half defiant. "The one Mommy never talked about." Miho stood, walking toward him. "I was scared to be in the picture, but I want to be in it now." Haru squinted. "What's my middle name?" Miho blinked. "I don't know yet." Haru nodded, unimpressed. "I'll let you sit on the edge of my bed, but only for 5 minutes." Miho smiled and sat carefully, his hands on his knees like he was entering sacred ground. Jaiwoo stood at the doorway, her arms around herself, watching. It was more than she had imagined, and still it wasn't enough to make her heart feel safe. But something was shifting. The children weren't guarded, they were open, raw, resilient. They hadn't built walls yet. They still believed in beginnings. Downstairs, after the children were asleep, Jaiwoo poured tea into 2 cups. Her hands still trembled. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The quiet made everything sharper. Miho entered the kitchen with cautious steps. "I didn't expect him to say that," he said, voice low. "Neither did I." He sat across from her, picking up the cup slowly, as if afraid it would vanish in his hands. "I thought they'd hate me." Jaiwoo looked at him. "They don't know how." Miho nodded, staring at the steam rising between them. "You didn't tell them about me." "I told them I loved them. I told them they were wanted, that they were safe. I didn't need to tell them what you weren't." He winced. "I didn't deserve that mercy. I didn't do it for you." Silence, the kind that bends time. Miho finally spoke again. "What happens now?" Jaiwoo's fingers traced the rim of her cup. "I don't know. You keep showing up. You keep proving that you're not the man who left." "I'm not." "Then prove it. Not with words. With mornings. With routines. With scraped knees and flu seasons. With diapers, with missed naps, with bedtime stories when you're exhausted." He nodded, his eyes shimmering. "I want all of it." Jaiwoo looked at him, really looked. "You missed their first words. Their first steps. Their first birthdays." "I know. You weren't there when I cried in the clinic, terrified I'd lose them before they were born." "I know." Her voice trembled. "You weren't there when they asked me if they had a dad, and I told them they had me. I will never let them ask that again." Something in Jaiwoo broke then, not in pain but in release. Her shoulders dropped. Her breath deepened. She didn't know if she believed him yet. But tonight, her heart didn't feel alone. She stood. "I'll make up the couch," she said. "It's not comfortable." "I'm not here for comfort," he replied. "I'm here to stay." Jaiwoo paused, then disappeared into the hallway. Miho leaned back, staring at the small kitchen where love had once died, and maybe, just maybe, was beginning to breathe again. Upstairs, 3 children dreamed, and downstairs, 2 people, no longer strangers, not yet whole, sat in the fragile, precious space between regret and redemption. Through the curtains and the familiar shuffle of small feet on wooden floors, Jaiwoo was already in the kitchen, her back turned, humming a lullaby as she stirred the oatmeal. The same one she used to sing during her pregnancy when she was too afraid to sleep. The melody wrapped around her like a thread to the past, steady and bittersweet. Miho stepped into the room quietly. His hair was slightly messy from the couch, and his shirt wrinkled at the collar. But there was something calm in his eyes, the kind of calm that comes after crying alone in the dark. "I didn't know mornings could feel like this," he said, his voice husky. Jaiwoo didn't turn. "Like what?" He reached for 2 mugs and began pouring coffee. "Like beginnings. Soft, uncertain, real." She said nothing, but her hands didn't stop moving. A door creaked upstairs, and soon the thunder of 3 small bodies running down echoed through the house. "Mommy! Mommy! Where's the man?" Haru called. "He's in the kitchen," Jaiwoo replied, her tone steady. Min-jae ran straight to Miho, climbing into his lap without hesitation. I had a dream, he said. You were in it. Yeah, Miho asked, smiling. What was I doing? You were fixing my toy robot. And then we had ice cream. I like that dream. Suo wandered in and tugged on Jaiwoo's shirt. Can he come to the park with us today? Jaiwoo met her daughter's gaze. Only if he wants to. For pairs of eyes turned toward Miho. He smiled gently. I'd love to. Later that day, the park was bright and loud. Children running everywhere. Parents chatting on benches. Jaiwoo sat on a worn wooden bench under a tree, watching Miho chase Haru through the grass while Min-jae pushed Suo on a swing. It looked so normal. Too normal. That's what scared her the most. Normal made you vulnerable. Normal made you believe. Hanul arrived just as the sun began to lower. She sat beside Jaiwoo, her sunglasses pushed into her hair. I heard about the gala, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. They're still talking about it in Seoul. You broke the internet. Jaiwoo sighed. I didn't do anything. He did. Hanul glanced at Miho. You letting him stay? I'm letting him try. That's a dangerous thing to allow. Jaiwoo nodded. So was falling in love with him the first time. After a long pause, Hanul said, You still love him? No, Jaiwoo replied too quickly. Then, more softly, Not like before. Maybe not. But your eyes still soften when he kneels to tie Haru's shoes. Jaiwoo didn't respond. That evening, the children fell asleep quicker than usual. Miho helped clean up the toys, stacking them in baskets and adjusting the pillows on the couch. You don't have to do all this, Jaiwoo said quietly, drying dishes. I want to, he replied. I should. She placed the plate down and turned to face him. I need to know something. He met her eyes immediately. Anything. If I get sick one day, if something happens and I can't be the one holding everything together, will you stay? Not just for them. For me. The question hung in the air like something sacred. Miho stepped closer, voice trembling. Jaiwoo, I already lost the woman who loved me once. If I lose you again, in any form, I don't know how I'll survive it. That's not a promise, she whispered. No, he said. It's a prayer. Jaiwoo looked down, then nodded. They're everything to me. I know, and I won't let anyone, not even their father, disrupt what I've built. You don't have to let me in all at once, he said. Just don't shut the door completely. She hesitated. Then, very slowly, stepped aside and opened the window behind her. A breeze passed through, light and cool. I'm not opening the door, she said, eyes fixed on the night. But maybe the air can change. Miho smiled faintly. I'll take the air. And they stood there in the dim light of the kitchen. Not healed, not whole, but breathing the same fragile hope. That night, Jaiwoo didn't lock the door. Not because she trusted, but because trust had to be given in pieces. And for now, that was enough. Unknown number. Seoul area code. She answered out of instinct. Hello. There was a pause. Then a familiar voice. Cold, perfectly enunciated, and sharp as a blade. This is Madame Huang. Jaiwoo froze, the warmth draining from her hands. You may not remember me, the voice continued, but I believe it's time we spoke, face to face. Jaiwoo stayed silent. I've waited long enough. My son may be playing house with you, but I will not have my family's blood hidden away like a village secret. We need to discuss their future. Jaiwoo swallowed hard. They have a future, one you tried to erase. You think raising 3 illegitimate children makes you noble? No, it makes you dangerous. You're the only stain left on my son's name, and I will not allow it to grow. Jaiwoo's hand tightened around the phone. Her voice came low. Don't ever call my children that again. Then you should listen, because if you don't bring them to Seoul voluntarily, I will file for custody. The world tilted. Jaiwoo whispered, You wouldn't dare. I would, and I have the lawyers to do it. The only thing standing between you and court is your cooperation. Then silence. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until the call ended. The phone slid from her hand and landed on the couch. "Mommy," Sua peeked from the hallway. "Your face looks scared." Jaiwoo knelt and pulled her daughter into her arms. "It's nothing, baby. Just noise." That night, Jaiwoo sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the envelope Miho had given her weeks ago. The letters he had written for each child. She hadn't opened them, but now she wondered, how much did he know about the war that still lived in his mother's heart? She needed answers. When Miho arrived the next morning, smiling, hair still tousled from sleep, Jaiwoo didn't let him inside. "We need to talk." He immediately froze. "What happened?" "Your mother called me." His face drained of color. She what? "She threatened to sue me for custody." "No, Jaiwoo, no. She said I should bring the kids to her voluntarily before she does it through court." Miho stepped forward. "Jaiwoo, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't." "I believe you," she said, her voice strained. "But it's not about belief. It's about protection. You don't know what that woman is capable of. She won't touch them. She already has." With words, Miho rubbed his face, breathing hard. "I'll go to her. I'll stop this. I don't want a confrontation. I want a shield." "I'll be that," he said quickly. "I'll be whatever you need me to be." Jaiwoo hesitated. "Then promise me one thing. Anything. You won't let her poison them. Not with her money. Not with her shame. I won't let her near them. I mean it, Miho. If she gets one whisper into their ears about being unwanted, unworthy, I won't just shut the door. I'll disappear again. And this time you won't find us." His voice cracked. "You won't have to. I'll keep them safe. From her. From everything." The promise lingered in the air like smoke. Miho returned to Seoul that night. Alone. He didn't go to the company. He didn't go to the apartment. He went straight to the estate. The house where Jaiwoo had once stood in silence as his mother dissected her with words that wore pearls. He found her in the garden, pruning flowers that bloomed only for appearances. She didn't look up when he approached. "So," she said coldly, "she called you crying already? You'll leave them alone." She clipped a stem calmly. "You've always had such weak taste in women. They're not yours to touch. Not your business. Not your legacy." She finally turned to face him. "They are your blood, and that makes them mine. They're people, my children, and Jaiwoo is their mother. You lost your right to speak her name the day you helped destroy her." Her eyes narrowed. "You'd throw away your family over this woman?" "I already did, and it was the only right decision I ever made." She scoffed. "Do you even know what she's cost you? What she'll cost the company? The name?" "I don't care about the name," he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "I care about them. I care about waking up to little feet on wood floors. About Haru's sleepy smile. Sua's questions. Minji's dreams. I care about every moment I missed while I was busy being your son instead of their father." Madame Huang stood frozen, her lips pressed in a hard, thin line. Miho stepped closer. "You call them stains, I call them light. You see shame, I see a second chance. You're making a fool of yourself. Maybe, but at least I'm finally making it for the right reasons." He turned to leave. "I won't forget this," she said behind him. He paused. "I hope you don't," he replied, "because I never will." And he walked away, not from wealth, not from tradition, but from a version of himself that had once bowed to everything but love. When he returned to Jaiwoo that night, she opened the door before he knocked. She searched his face. "Is it done?" He nodded. "She won't come near you. I told her everything." Jaiwoo stepped aside, letting him in. For the first time, he didn't feel like a guest. He felt like he belonged. Not because she said so, and he always did. He arrived before breakfast. He stayed past dinner. He helped bathe them, read them stories, sat cross-legged on the floor putting together puzzles even when his back ached. Jaiwoo watched, always from a short distance. Her heart still carried shadows, but slowly, it began to warm. Not from grand gestures, but from the small, consistent presence of a man learning how to be the father he never thought he could be. One afternoon, after the children had fallen asleep for their nap, Jaiwoo stood at the door of the living room. Miho was there on the couch, his eyes closed, his hand resting on a stuffed toy that one of the kids had dropped before crawling upstairs. He looked exhausted, peaceful, familiar. She stepped into the room, her arms crossed. "You look like someone who belongs here." His eyes opened slowly. "I hope that's true." She walked toward the window and looked out at the quiet garden. "They're happy. They deserve to be." "You're learning," she said softly. "I'm trying." There was a pause. Then she turned to face him. "You know Min-jae has nightmares, right?" Miho nodded. "He had one last night. I sat beside his bed until he calmed down." Jaiwoo raised an eyebrow. "He didn't tell me that." Miho gave a tired smile. "He said he wanted to be brave like you, didn't want to wake you up." Her heart stung, unexpectedly. She lowered her voice. "He only started sleeping through the night a few months ago." "I'm sorry I wasn't there for the others," Miho said. "I know I missed everything." "You didn't miss everything," Jaiwoo whispered. "You're here now." He stood up, walked slowly to her side, and gently asked, "Do you still see me as the man who left?" She met his eyes. "Sometimes." "Do you want to?" She didn't answer at first. Then, after a breath, "I want to see the man who stayed." Miho nodded, emotion swelling in his chest. "Then let me keep proving that I am." Later that week, Jaiwoo caught a cold. Nothing serious, just exhaustion taking its toll. But for someone who had carried 3 children alone, rest had always been more of a theory than a reality. She sat at the table, pale, head leaning on her hand. The children played nearby, but their voices were like echoes behind glass. Miho noticed instantly. He knelt beside her. "You okay?" She tried to wave him off. "It's just a cold. I've had worse." "Jaiwoo." His tone was gentle but firm. She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I'm fine, really." He took her hand. "You don't have to be." Her lip trembled. "If I'm not, everything falls apart." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Not anymore." That night he cooked. He bathed the kids. He read the stories. Jaiwoo rested for real for once, listening to the sound of Miho's voice echoing from the other room. And then the little bear found his way home. 3 small sighs, 3 small hearts finally safe. Miho peeked into her room later, hesitating at the doorway. "I made you ginger tea." She sat up slowly, the covers pulled to her chest. "Thank you." He placed the mug on her nightstand, but didn't leave right away. "I used to think I had to buy forgiveness," he said, staring down at the floor. "That if I did enough, showed up enough, maybe it would erase what I did." She watched him. "But now, I know I can't erase it. I don't want to. I want them to know who I was, so they understand why I became who I am." Jaiwoo's voice was soft. "You don't owe them perfection. I owe them truth," he said. She nodded. "That's all I've ever asked." Miho turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Miho." He turned back. "Tonight you can stay, if you want." His eyes widened. "Jaiwoo." "On the couch," she clarified quickly, the corner of her mouth lifting. "But don't wake up late. They'll expect pancakes." His laugh was quiet, emotional. "I'll be up before the sun." He left the door open behind him. Jaiwoo looked at the tea he'd made, her hand resting gently on the mug. And for the first time in years, she slept without fear. Jaiwoo stirred before opening her eyes, already sensing their little footsteps nearby. When she sat up, her heart caught in her throat. At the edge of her bed stood Min-jae, Sua, and Haru, each holding a piece of paper scribbled with messy hearts and crooked letters. "Surprise?" Min-jae whispered, trying not to smile too wide. Sua held up her drawing proudly. "It says, 'Mommy is the sun.'" Haru, barely holding onto his card, added, "And the moon, and the sky, and pancakes." Jaiwoo let out a shaky laugh, blinking back unexpected tears. "Why all this?" Min-jae smiled. Daddy said we should thank you, because you're the best. Her smile faltered at the word. Daddy. It still hit differently. Not painfully anymore, but with weight. With meaning. She glanced toward the doorway. Miho stood there, holding a tray with tea, toast, and a single flower in a jar. He didn't speak, just offered her the smallest, gentlest smile. She took a breath and nodded. Come in. He stepped forward, placing the tray in her lap. They woke me up at 5 a.m. to plan this, he said. I had no choice. Haru climbed onto the bed beside her. He didn't even know how to fold the paper right. I had expert teachers, Miho replied. Jaiwoo looked around at the small chaos. The wrinkled papers, the crayon still clutched in Sua's hand, the lopsided flower in the jar, and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Peace. But peace never lasted long. That afternoon, while Jaiwoo and Miho watched the children paint outside, a car pulled up to the cottage. Sleek, silver, quiet as a threat. Jaiwoo's entire body tensed. Miho stood immediately. Stay with the kids. From the window, Jaiwoo saw the door open. It wasn't his mother. It was Sohee. She stepped out in heels too clean for the countryside. Her lips painted perfectly, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Jaiwoo's breath caught. Her fingers clenched the armrest of the chair. Sohee walked slowly, gracefully, like someone